Alright, we're basically just going to look at every gold card because they're all gold cards. Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart. White and a blue for a 1/3 legendary creature human wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. Huh. 3 white creatures you control gain +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. Huh. The trouble is, it does require you to play a second creature. And the first creature was already kind of an ask. Fight Rigging with World Spell. Fight Rigging does potentially need top end now, because it's actually losing the Valkies. So I don't know what it, tries to cheat into play anymore, in the context of Standard. Yeah, I don't know. I'm so close to being interested in this card, but I don't know how exactly you best enable the second creature that turns this into a card draw engine. And then the 1/3 stat line just isn't hyper interesting to begin with. I don't know. Maybe there's something somewhere, but it doesn't come to mind immediately. Sten, Paranoid Partisan. White and a blue for a 2/2 legendary creature human wizard. As Sten, Paranoid Partisan enters the battlefield, choose a card type other than creature or land. Spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. 1 white and a blue, exile Sten, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. I mean, I guess that's cool. It's another way to reduce the cost of instants and sorceries. I don't generally think that I want to play an Electromancer type effect that's a 2/2 on average. And I think I probably still don't really want to play an Electromancer in blue-white. That's a limited card. This has a lot of text, so we're going to have to read it. Why can't you choose a land? What would that break? Presumably just to protect you from yourself, since choosing land doesn't do anything. Vejar, Vidalian Desecrator. Blue-black for a 1/2 legendary creature Phyrexian Merfolk Wizard. Tap. Draw a card, then discard a card. If you discard an instant or sorcery this way, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Ooh. Okay. Pay 2, sacrifice Vejar, Vidalian Desecrator. You may cast target instant or sorcery spell from your graveyard this turn. If that spell would be put in your graveyard, exile it instead, activate only as a sorcery. Oh. We were so close to almost being Snapcaster in a cool way. Still, I mean, this is Merfolk Looter that gains life and does damage? This is close to not being awful. The legendary downsides, well, I guess not actually inherently super huge, since you can discard it to itself, but you'd rather be discarding instants and sorceries, I suppose. I don't hate it. I don't love it, but I definitely don't hate it. Especially post-board and control mirrors, where they don't really want to be playing removal spells for it anyway. You can just drop it on 2 and then start clocking your opponent while also presumably improving the quality of your hand. Yeah. Alright. Next up, Ertai Resurrected. 2 blue and a black for a 3/2 legendary creature Phyrexian human wizard with flash. When Ertai Resurrected enters the battlefield, choose up to 1 counter-target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability its controller draws a card. Destroy another target creature or planeswalker its controller draws a card. Huh. I do sort of want to like this, but I hate that it's legendary. 1, because that means you can't play cool Fable combos with it, but also, what are you going to do? Put 1 copy of this card in your deck? This is really, really, really close to Obscura Interceptor, in that I think they're basically the same card, except this card doesn't have lifelink. The big advantage of this is that it can hit a creature or planeswalker that's already in play, so it's more flexible than Interceptor in that sense, but I mean, lifelink's a cool word. You can use it to counter your own Lotus Field ETB, and you get to draw a card. That's pretty neat. The controller of the ability that is being countered or of the creature or planeswalker that is being killed gets to draw the card. Could stifle Demonic Pact trigger. That's true. We could hypothetically play a copy in a Demonic Pact deck, which is actually pretty valuable against control decks, because there are a lot of times where you try to answer your Demonic Pact on the opponent's turn. They get into a counterspell war. Then you untap, put the lose the game trigger on the stack, and try to stifle the lose the game trigger, and they hopefully can't win both counterspell wars. That's actually... That's not uninteresting at all, but I'm probably more interested in Demonic Pact than most people. Yeah. This is not complete garbage, but also isn't like actively good either. What do we got? All right, this is a bunch of text. Let's go with this one. Lagamos, Hand of Hatred, 1 black red for a 1/3 legendary creature human shaman. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Tap, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle activate only if 5 or more creatures died this turn. Huh. Are there any... This card becomes very rapidly close to excellent if there's a reasonable combo that searches the library for a card. But is there a way to do that? Anvil hypothetically gets close, but I still don't even think it actually gets close. This goes in a Rakdos, Sack, Kato, and Anvil deck. Maybe? They don't really have room for 3-drops, though. I don't even think Anvil actually gets to the point where they sacrifice enough creatures to enable this. I don't know. This rapidly goes from bad to good, if there's something that fits that. But if there is, I'm uncertain. The new Burn Down the House would leave Lagamos phased out until your next upkeep, at which point a bunch of creatures hadn't died that turn anymore. Regrettably. So moving on. Rivaz of the Claw, 1 black red for a 3/3 legendary creature via Shion Warlock, Menace. Tap to add 2 mana of any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast dragon creature spells. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard. Whenever you cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard, it gains when this creature dies, exile it. Huh. Okay, so like this isn't stellar in the sense that it's... 3 mana 3/3 Menace isn't garbage. Mana Dork for dragons that color fixes isn't garbage. Also is card advantage. This is definitely worse than Fable. So you play 4 Fables, and then maybe you play 2 Rivazes after your first 4 Fables? Oh, that's a fascinating point. It's not just the dragon creature gets exiled only when it dies as a trigger after it dies, and not a replacement effect for dying. Meaning, if you have a dragon with flash, and it keeps dying on your turn, you can keep playing it with Rivaz in response to its own exile trigger. It's amusing. Good in Alchemy. I guess with the perpetual cost reduction effects could be interesting as another card advantage engine. That deck does lack... Oh no, wait, hold on. We're losing like everything in Alchemy. I have no clue what rotates in Alchemy. Like Goldspan Dragon's gone. Which of the supplemental set cards rotate out ever? Are we losing Dragon Whelp? I have no idea. Nothing originally from Alchemy rotates? Not even the stuff that came out like a year and a half? The earliest ones from Midnistrad? Is this true? Maybe. I'll believe it. I'd see no reason to fact check chat. That would only make this experience worse. The new dragons not seeing play due to exile removal was, in my opinion, kind of over-exaggerated. Most of the new dragons did not see play because they were not good. And Vanishing Verse, despite not actually seeing play, kind of took the blame for that. But also, it's rotation. Everything is weaker now. So, hypothetically, cards that weren't really good enough before might be good enough now? Maybe. The red one is by far and away the best of that series of dragons, and Ravaz plays pretty well with it, so it's interesting. Again, I think that this does not see play before any copies of Fable, but 4 copies of Fable, 2 copies of Ravaz is pretty reasonable sounding. Alright, what does this thing say? Maria, Scholar of Antiquity, 1 red and a green for a 3/3 legendary creature elf artificer. Tap an untapped non-token artifact you control, add green. Tap 2 untapped non-token artifacts you control. Exile the top card of your library, you may play it this turn. Non-token. Must be so much fun if you could do it with tokens. I don't directly see how this ends up being useful given that it can't be tokens, but, I mean, hypothetically that's a lot of card advantage in Mana Dorks eventually. I just don't really know what non-token artifacts exist for this to work with. It would be really strong with token artifacts due to Blood and Treasure. I know, exactly, right? Think of how cool it would be with Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Why don't more cards synergize with Fable of the Mirror Breaker? It's like WotC doesn't even want to make that card good or something. Yeah, there is potentially some really interesting combos to be explored here, looking at it in more depth at some other point, because it does not take a lot of effort for an artifact to be able to untap, and then it just starts making a bunch of mana. But who knows? We'll see. We shall see. All right. Our old friend Rada has been demoted to an uncommon. Oh dear. How unfortunate. 2 red and a green for a 3/3 legendary creature elf warrior. Whenever Rada Coalition Warlord becomes tapped, another target creature you control gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is... Never mind. A lot of text. Too much mana, not enough effect. Next, uncommon with a bunch of text. Rulik Mon's Warren Chief. 1 red, green, green for a 3/3 legendary creature Goblin. I've been disappointed by a 4-drop green uncommon that stat line was 3/3 once already today. Twice would be quite a lot. Menace. Whenever Rulik Mon's Warren Chief attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you didn't put a card onto the battlefield this way, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. Not even attacking. Okay, that sucks. Moving on. King Darian, the Roman numerals 98th? Is L 50 or 100? This is either 48 or 98. 48th. Okay. I definitely know Roman. 1 green and a white for a 2/3 legendary creature human soldier. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. 3 green and a white. Put a +1/+1 counter on King Darian and create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Sacrifice King Darian. Creature tokens you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Huh. I mean, I guess this isn't bad. It's an anthem and a mana sink. and a 2/3 body, if you're in green-white, it's probably good. Oh yeah, anything that's a mana sink that also is an Anthem and has a good stat line, like, this is a very solid limited card if you just have the capacity to play the colors that it is in. I don't imagine this actually, like, cares about token synergy at all. Like, mostly just a 3-mana 2/3 that is an Anthem, which is something that's absolutely reasonable to play one of, at the minimum. Combos with Adeline? You could say, I guess. Adeline combos with cards existing that are creatures and are capable of attacking. So maybe that's not actually saying that much. But does give you some insurance against 4-mana white board wipes, I guess. Alright. A Johnny Sleeper Agent. Hypothetically, somewhere down in here there could be a Phyrexian squirrel if we had the full art of this, given that they seem to tend to like hiding squirrels on a Johnny art somewhere in the text box. 1, a green-white hybrid Phyrexian mana, and a white for a 4 loyalty legendary planeswalker Ajani. If you paid the Phyrexian mana with life, it enters with 2 fewer loyalty counters. +1. Reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature or planeswalker card, put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it on the bottom of your library. -3. Distribute 3+1/+1 counters among up to 3 target creatures. They gain Vigilance until end of turn. -6. You get an emblem with whenever you cast a creature or planeswalker spell, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. This feels very reminiscent of Tamiyo, in the sense that, like, it feels like they kind of went overboard on making sure that it wasn't good enough to play it without paying the Phyrexian mana as real mana. Like, hypothetically, -3ing this the turn it comes down into play isn't garbage. Except that's mostly not good. The uptick's cool in that it does require them to kill a Johnny eventually, and like combos with the downtick in the sense that you're looking at creatures that protect a Johnny because you gave them Vigilance, while also making them big, while also attacking the opponent. The trouble is that there's like this hyper narrow window where you could hypothetically play this thing on turn 4, and at like with you having 2 creatures in play, or even 1, I guess. But like every turn other than turn 4, it seems pretty bad. I'm just not very interested in it. It's disappointing. Next up. Alright, this looks like a real card. Ilias Elcor, Sadistic Pilgrim. White and black for a 2/2 legendary creature for Phyrexian Core Cleric. Death Touch. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Okay. I mean, I can imagine a lot of decks just playing a 1 of this. It's a Blood Artist, but also it attacks, and it's got Death Touch. Doesn't affect the opponent's creatures. It's like reasonable. The legendary downside is the most significant portion of this card that's kind of hard to evaluate. Yeah, not embarrassing to play like a 2 of. Seems fine. Aaron, Benalli's Ruin, white, black for a 3/3 legendary creature for Phyrexian human with menace. White and a black tap, sacrifice another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Probably not good enough for constructed, but certainly very cool and limited. But yeah, mostly doesn't seem strong enough for constructed. Radadravik, Averborg. 2 white and a black for a 3/3 legendary creature zombie wizard with Vigilance and Ward 2. Other zombies you control have Vigilance. Whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Ward 2 makes this kind of interesting. What does this do with Edgar? When Edgar dies, you get to return one Edgar transformed, the original, and you make a clone of the creature half that's a 2/2 zombie that also is a vampire, so it gets... That doesn't suck. Especially because you keep getting to make more non-legendary Edgars as your original Edgar comes back and dies again. Can't copy legendaries with Fable, so no synergy there, I don't think. There's probably a fair whack of cards you can play that do interesting combos with Radaburg. And yeah, the ward makes this pretty resilient. The insurance against board wipes, because if there's another legendary on the field at the same time, Ratadrobic, like, returns copies to the battlefield after the board wipes happen. Yeah, it doesn't really have a legendary downside, since you can play it, sack one, and then just get the second Ratadrobic. The only difference is that it's a 2/2. Yeah, it's true. You can copy the token of Ratadrobic with Fable, although I don't know that that necessarily does much. Okay, wait, but so you can just play 4 Ratadrobics because they actually do scale. The second Ratadrobic is just a 2/2 Ratadrobic. The third Ratadrobic is 2 Ratadrobics. Huh. Also, the second Ratadrobic that you play that is a token gives the first Ratadrobic, like, double board wipe protection. If you play the second Ratadrobic, get a Ratadrobic token, then if they board wipe your token and your original Ratadrobic, you just get 2 Ratadrobic tokens. Wait, that's actually really good and interesting. Oh, yeah, you only end up with 1 token after the board wipe. You're right, not 2. Raffine could be interesting, yeah. I guess the biggest problem I have with Ratadrobic is that, like, everything that I want to combo with it is probably a 4 or 5 drop. I don't know that playing, like, 8 4-drops is a good idea, but I want to. That is a very interesting angle for a black-white mid-rangey deck to take. Ratadrobic with Kroxa is an additional discard. But imagine if we played Uro with Ratadrobic. Then we get double the growth spirals. If only that was legal in a format. What is Ward? Ward is if a spell or ability that your opponent controls targets Ratadrobic, it gets countered unless they pay the ward cost. So basically, if they try to play a removal spell that targets Ratadrobic, then they have to pay an additional 2 to cast that spell. Yeah, this is actually pretty interesting. The only downside is that, like, the stats aren't great, so it's not exactly blocking terribly efficiently, slowing your opponent down if they're trying to just kill you. Zombie Thalia is kind of a level of morbid and sad that I'm not really willing to entertain at this point, but could be entirely reasonably not that bad if your deck is just a bunch of legendaries and not a bunch of, you know, non-creatures. Thalia into Raffine into Ratadrobic sounds like a deeply amusing curve out. Okay, this looks like a dumb card. Balmor, Battle Mage Captain. Blue-red for a 1/3 legendary creature, bird, wizard, flyer. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control gain +1/+0 and gain trample until end of turn. That's not a lot of power and toughness boost, for the typical prowess style card, but giving all of your other creatures trample and all your other creatures +1 for a 2-drop, that's certainly very interesting. Very interesting. Once again, as with all blue-red creatures that cost less than 3 mana, I will direct all inquiries as to whether or not they're even remotely playable to Holy Diva. Next up, Joyra, Ageless Innovator. Blue and a red for a 2/3 legendary creature, human artificer. Tap, put 2 ingenuity counters on Joyra. Then you may put an artifact card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, where X is the number of ingenuity counters on Joyra. Okay. I'm sure that that's useful in some context to someone. I don't see exactly how to make that useful in any particular way. Oh, that's a good point. In Legacy, I don't know what you could do, but in Vintage, you could put Black Lotus into play with Joyra. And Black Lotus is a pretty powerful card, so that sounds good, maybe. Is Joyra good with 4 mana Teferi? I mean, like, what artifact are you doing with 4 mana Teferi, I guess? I don't know. Like, I can't think of any artifact you'd really want to put into play other than just, like, the Celestis? And you could just cast the Celestis? I don't know. Najal the Stormrunner, 2 blue, blue, red for a 5/4 legendary creature, Efreet Wizard. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. Whenever Najal the Stormrunner attacks, you may pay 2. If you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. Okay, that's fine. Definitely fine. Not great stats, not great abilities, but it's fine. Following that, Urg, Spawn of Turg, black, black, green for a star 5 legendary creature, Frogbeast. Urg, Spawn of Turg's power is equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put the card in the graveyard. Black, green, sacrifice a land, you gain 2 life. Cool, it sucks. Deeply upsetting that for some reason Urg is a black-green card instead of a teamer card. Very wrong. Very wrong. I'm sure that they will be hearing from my lawyers. Nimata, Primeval Warden. 2 black and a green for a 3/4 legendary creature Treefolk with Reach. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. When you do, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. Green, sacrifice a Saproling. Nimata Primeval Warden gets +2/+2 until end of turn. 1 and a black, sacrifice 2 Saprolings, draw a card. Well, is this Kalitas? If you squint, is this Kalitas? Doesn't have lifelink, but it's got reach. I'm going to go with this card is Kalitas, but strictly standard playable. Drawing a card isn't bad, no. Kalitas was like a card that was good against aggro, and this doesn't gain life. So, like, I definitely see less niche for this than Kalitas had, but it's not embarrassing. Yeah, it's definitely not embarrassing. It's just fine. It has its niche in the sense that if you really want to exile your opponent's creatures, it does that. Okay, hey, this is actually an interesting card. Baird Argivian, I'm guessing? Argivian Recruiter? Red and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature, human soldier. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power greater than its base power, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Mostly interesting because if you play this on turn 2 after having played Kumano on turn 1, then this automatically triggers itself. Or if you control any creature with a +1/+1 counter on it at any point for any reason, then at the end of the turn you make a 1/1 soldier. So the idea that this is like 4 stats into play, or 4/4 worth of stats into play after a turn 1 Kumano is kind of Interesting? It's kind of interesting. I don't think there's any 1-drop you can play that synergizes with it other than Kumano, though, huh? How does this card work with anything that has Star for a power? Rabbit Battery and Phoenix would not do it. Not on turn 1. Both of them are just defaults. Star is defined as the base power. Okay, yeah, that tracks. So Iron Apprentice being a 1-drop that enters with a +1/+1 counter, I suppose, is one way to trigger it. But that would require putting Iron Apprentice in the deck. The trouble with going for XX is that then we would, like, hypothetically, to enable this, have to be playing an XX as a 1-drop 1/1, and that, again, is kind of just, like, not good. But it also synergizes with anything that's equipped, so Rabbit Battery not necessarily as a 1-drop into this, but on a later turn, turn 3, Rabbit Battery equipping Baird, good. The closest thing that you can be said about Shivan Devastator being good has probably been that it does technically enable Baird, but I feel like a pretty huge percentage of Baird's strength is whether or not you can play it on turn 2 and have it immediately enabled. Oh! Does Adeline 100% of the time enable Baird? Is Adeline a 0/4 that gets +X, or is it Star? It's a Star. Bomber. Is Devastator stinky? Yeah, I think so. I don't think Devastator's very good. Oh, well, we'll keep this card in mind. This is interesting. I don't, like, the reward you're getting out of it isn't huge enough to make me think that it's really worth warping a deck around. But I like the challenge this presents from a deck building standpoint. Makes you think about some interesting things. Yeah, anything that puts a +1/+1 counter or is a Lord makes it trigger every turn. All right, this is a lot of text. Astor, Bearer of Blades. 2 red and a white for a 4/4 legendary creature, human warrior. When Astor, Bearer of Blades enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Equipment you control have equip 1. Vehicles you control have crew 1. Okay. I'm sure there are people who like playing equipment and vehicles that have giant equip costs and giant crew costs who are going to get a lot of fun out of this. Cutthroat Contender does technically enable Baird, but then would require us to be in a Mardu deck that plays black on turn 1 and red-white on turn 2. That's probably not very doable-ish. So, Astor... I mean, Hammer Time exists, but I don't want to think about how cards function in Modern. Parhelion does get cheaper to crew. The 1-mana... 7-power vehicle from Kaladesh that doesn't exist on Arena, so you can't play it in Explorer or Historic, technically, if we're talking about Pioneer. Yeah, Greasefang technically can be Mardu, but more typically is Abzan or Esper. Colossal Plow exists. Astor can rock a plow. Astor can take a packed weapon and not have you discard a card as a part of the crew cost, or part of the equip cost. You can just equip for 1 instead. Does that mean that Astor knows how to, like, decurse things? I guess? I don't know. Mostly this looks like a card that is potentially something Hammer Time might want, but I know nothing about Modern or how Hammer Time as a deck functions, so... Meh. Meh. Tori Davant. Davenant. Fury Rider. 1 red, white. 3/3 legendary creature, human knight, vigilance, trample. Whenever you Tori Davenant Fury Rider attacks, all other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Other red attacking creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. Untap each other white attacking creature you control. Ah, I see. I assumed this had haste, and it does not. but mostly not having haste makes this seem pretty bad. Moving on. Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief. Green and a blue for a 2/1 legendary creature, fairy rogue, flying. Whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, you may copy that spell. That copy targets Ivy. A copy of an aura spell becomes a token. Huh. Oh. We're hitting the diminishing returns point of a set review, where it is now 1 a.m., and I am being asked to somehow figure out if a Boggly Auras deck has, like, any kind of use for a blue-green card, and I do not know the answer to that, but I guess that technically exists. And putting a Curiosity on a different creature and getting a copy of Curiosity on Ivy sounds kind of fun, I guess. You can also play... this is a legendary. So you can play Karn's Temporal Sundering, targeting one of their creatures, putting a creature back in their hand, and you get a copy bouncing Ivy, and you get to take 2 extra turns. Sundering targets you too. But it doesn't say that targets only a single target other than Ivy. It says targets only a single creature other than Ivy. So I think it's fine that it targets something else, as long as it's only targeting a single creature. For that matter, you can technically play that 6-mana counterspell that targets one of everything. I hypothetically can copy Magma Opus with Ivy if you do all the damage to one creature and don't, or only tap one creature. Doesn't this make the opponent's removal really good? Thankfully, it says may, so we don't have to. Magma Opus kills Ivy. Not if we deal all 4 damage to the opponent's face and tap down only one creature as the only target for Magma Opus. Then we tap Ivy, but Ivy probably needs a rest after stealing that entire 8-mana spell anyway, so that's fitting. My reading is definitely that one creature and no more creatures than one. I don't think that it cares about the other stuff. I feel like in my brain other things that have been differently worded from that have had different wording. But maybe not. Again, 1 a.m. Running out of ability to recall the existence of other cards. Oh, yeah, okay, we're going to read this one because it's got a lot of text. Nail, Evizo Aeronaut, 2 green, blue, for a 2/4 legendary creature, elf scout with flying. That's like a cute picture. It's like a hot air balloon. And an elf just like chilling, happy in a hot air balloon. Also wearing an immensely fancy hat, which I respect. Anyway, Domain. Whenever Nail Avizo Aeronaut deals combat damage to a player, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic lands among lands you control. Put up to one of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom in a random order. Then if there are 5 basic land types among lands you control, draw a card. Wow, that's a limited only card. Thought I was going to like draw 3 cards after all that line of text. Nope, kind of just sucked. Zur, Eternal Schemer, white, blue, black for a 1/4 legendary creature, human wizard. Flying. Enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof. 1 and a white. Target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature in addition to its other types, and has base power and toughness each equal to its mana value. Oh dear. Okay. Permanently, not even until end of turn. That mostly doesn't sound good enough, but the mana cost on this is small enough that it's not deeply embarrassing. So Kiki then go face. For like the 1 turn before it transforms, I guess you can target the... So this makes Kiki into a Death Touch Lifelink Hexproofer. They do lose the keywords if Zur gets popped, yes. But also notably, Zur says that non-aura, not non-creature. So you can target Kiki to turn it into a 3/3, upgrade it from a 2/2. But yeah, Kiki having hexproof is cool. I don't hate that. I actually think this might be like a one of in 4-color Fable of the Mirror Breaker Esper with Diviner. You can discard it to Lazel and reanimate it immediately because it's a black 3-drop creature. It's probably not like actually better than Rafine, but I don't know. It's cute. Next up, Soulcar the Tainted, 2 blue, black, red for a 5/5 legendary creature elemental demon. At the beginning of your end step, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Draw a card. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Soulcar the Tainted deals 3 damage to up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. Exile Soulcar, then return it to the battlefield under your opponent's control. It's like Demonic Pact, but it's a creature. Notably, it's a legendary, so if you get the first 3 modes, you can just play another Soulcar and sack to legendary rules so that your opponent doesn't get the Soulcar. We can stifle this with Ertai. That's also true. I kind of think this is actually decent. I mean, 5 mana is kind of a lot, but 5 mana, 5/5 draw a card. Then also probably dies in combat or to a removal spell later on, but that also drains 2 and might kill an opponent's creature. I don't know that this is great, but it is, like, pretty reasonable. I wonder what we have that, like, gives us... Oh, you can play it with... Oh, never mind. It exiles and then comes back, so you can't exile it from a graveyard to stop it from going to their play. I want to like this. I think I might like this. 5 mana is a lot, but I think I might like it. There's definitely, like, bordering on potential here. Next up, Soul of Windgrace. 1 black, red, green, 5/4 legendary creature cat avatar. Whenever Soul of Windgrace enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. Green, discard a land card, you gain 3 life. 1 and a red, discard a land card, you draw a card. 2 and a black, discard a land card, Soul of Windgrace gains indestructible until end of turn, tap it. So I guess notably, if you play this as a 5-drop, you can, in response to the ETB, activate the discard a land ability to gain 3 life and put the land into play tapped. As, like, a ramp spell, I guess. I mean, yeah. None of this is particularly special for a 4-drop, other than that the 5/4 stat line is fine, and it potentially ramps you up to, like, a 7-drop, hypothetically. But most of the activated abilities are pretty expensive. The stat line is fine for a 4-drop. Doesn't have any defensive abilities. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. It's any graveyard, not just yours, which makes it potentially easier to play this and get the land immediately. It also plays nicely with Fable of the Mirror Breaker, discarding a land so that you can play it on turn 4 and actually get the ramp. I feel like being able to play this on turn 4 and get ramp out of it is, like, a pretty big deal as far as how good this card is. Yeah, the Streets of New Capenna life gain fetches aren't embarrassing with this, and you can just play the full 4 suite of the Jund fetches. Yeah, as far as land destruction for opponent's card goes, we have the Field of Ruins. We have the 2-drop land destruction that draws a card and has the opponent go get a basic. Plays relatively well with Channel, although there aren't a lot of things that you'd ever want to channel on curve for any particular reason. Oh, does Wildfire rotate? Oh. Am I doing a tier list for any decks of any format at this time? Nah, I don't really have an idea of any particular format. Everything's about to, well, Standard's about to get very shaken up. So is Alchemy. Historic I haven't played in a while. Pioneer I don't really feel like I've got enough data in my head to say anything concrete about. Okay, yeah. Soul of Windgrace is starting to grow on me. I like that this card might be interesting if you can trigger it the turn it ETBs. Plus, you get the Jund charm in Jund, and that card, like, might be the best card. I kind of feel like saying maybe Jund Shigeki edges out Sultai Shigeki. And this is a card that I would kind of consider playing in Jund Shigeki. Maybe. Mostly I just want to play Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, though. Ooh, Jund Shigeki actually gets to play... Well, I guess any Shigeki deck can play Titan of Industry. Jund Shigeki's just better at it because Fable of the Mirrorbreaker with Titan of Industry is really cool. Okay, maybe we're going to do Soul of Windgrace stupid things. Maybe that's actually going to happen. Maybe that's cool. Next up, Riff, Liberated Primeval. 2 red, white, green. My brain falling apart. 5/5, legendary creature dragon, flying ward 2. Other dragons you control have ward 2. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature or planeswalker and opponent control has dealt excess damage this turn, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. 5 mana, 5/5, flying ward 2. Seems worse than the blue Sphinx we were looking at earlier that just had better stuff. Hypothetically, excess damage, making dragons means your removal spells potentially turn into creatures, which is like hypothetically maybe interesting, but probably not. I'm gonna go with Seems Not bad. Mostly just Play with a dragon dork? Yeah. 4-color dragons? I don't know that I'm like deeply into that. This could be a 5/5 that immediately makes a 4/4. But how? How are you doing that without like having... I guess if it's a 6-drop and you're like playing a bunch of strangles and you strangle a weak creature? Maybe? I guess? I don't know. Attack with a large creature during combat and hope that they block in a way that allows excess damage to happen, I guess? It's not bad. It's not bad. I don't know if it's good, though. It does not make me excited. That does not make it bad. It just makes me unexcited. Shaman, Purifying Blade. Green, white, and a blue for a 3/3 legendary creature, human warrior with a lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay X. If you do, draw X cards. X can't be greater than the amount of life you gain this turn. Okay. So, like, 3 mana, 3/3 lifelinker that if they don't answer it or block it, can turn into a actually Super Sphinx's Rev? Huh. I was kind of ready to write this off, but it just occurred to me that this isn't pay 3 mana, draw X minus 3 cards like Sphinx's Rev is. This is just pay 3 mana, draw 3 cards. And you don't have to attack with it, but you do have to gain life somehow. But you can also just somehow have an engine that gains 1 life and then pays 1 mana. And, I mean, this is a pretty reasonable anti-aggro card. If you can somehow have Bant mana. If Shauna survives. Yeah, but it's 6/6, so it doesn't die to cut down. So it's basically invincible. As far as 1-life tap lands go, we definitely have the Esper Evolving Wild gain life things, which we're repeatedly not, like, embarrassed by. Righteous Valkyrie's rotating out, so we don't necessarily have the ability to play it in Standard, and I think Shauna's probably... Well, I guess Shaman might have potential application in formats older than Standard. I don't know how many, like, creature-based decks want to be drawing a bunch of cards with Shaman. I mean, I guess maybe. I don't know. This is probably a card that's going to have some actual nuanced applications in multiple scenarios. This can fill kind of multiple roles. The bare minimum rate of being an anti-aggro card that gains some life is kind of cool. I mean, I like the idea of playing Shauna against mono red in Alchemy. Oh no, they steal my Shauna for 3 mana. Now I have a Shauna who pings me for 0 damage and means that I can draw 1 card. No, I guess I can't block, so you still have to attack with it. But it's... I don't know. I'm interested. I was originally not expecting to, like, super love this card because it just says lifelink and requires the creature to survive, but it does still do all those things and have all those same restrictions, but maybe that's actually a better payoff than I was originally thinking we were getting for jumping through those hoops. Are there any party combos with it? I think we're losing all the party combos in Standard, and I don't think that there's any party payoffs that are powerful enough in any older formats to matter. Outside of... I guess we actually do still have some party stuff in Alchemy. There is the 1/3 that, when it ETBs or casts a creature with party, pumps another creature in your hand by +1/+1, which, again, also putting buffs on lifelingers is cool. Yeah. So that could potentially be interesting. There is the Orzhov party card, but then you're in, like, 4-color creatures, which sounds weird. Anyway, Joda the Unifier. White, blue, black, red, green. For a 5/5 legendary creature, human wizard. Legendary creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. Whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with lesser mana value. Oh gosh. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Okay, yeah, we're having 5-color nonsense fun. I don't even necessarily have it in me to say that this isn't a good card, because this is a lot of pump and a lot of card advantage. I only have it in me to say that I have no capacity whatsoever right now to figure out if 5-mana legendary nonsense is remotely viable. Do not have that capacity within me. The commander card, I mean... Cascade is a lot of card advantage to the extent that that's almost maybe constructed playable, but more like constructed possibly viable jank playable than constructed build around competitive playable. But it's an interesting card to play with Bard class like every other legendary ever printed. Timeless Lotus. 5-mana legendary artifact. Timeless Lotus enters the battlefield tapped. Tap to add 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red, and 1 green. Which is interesting in the sense that this is a cool card to untap with Teferi, who looks at the sunset, or whatever the name is. But also it's legendary, so you can't really play more than 1. But I guess you could hypothetically play 1 Timeless Lotus and, like, a Celestis with Teferi and not be terribly embarrassed? Definitely not terribly embarrassed. Huh. I mean, the main downside is that the card's pretty heinous if you don't have Teferi in play. But other than that one relatively major downside, the card's cool. It also feels a lot like you're probably just going to get your Timeless Lotus hit by a Boseiju fairly often, which probably isn't worth the opportunity cost of actually including it in the deck. But I would like to believe. But I probably shouldn't. I think this probably isn't very good. Okay, wait. Inscribe Tablet. It's got a lot of text, and it's not common. So 1 mana artifact. 1, tap, sacrifice Inscribe Tablet. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. Put a land card from among them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you didn't put a card into your hand this way, draw a card. Can hit non-basics, but mostly seems bad. Boop, 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 boop. Weatherlight. Completed. 2 mana, 5/5 legendary artifact vehicle. Flying. As long as Weatherlight completed has 4 or more Phyresis counters on it, it's a Phyrexian creature in addition to its other types. Whenever a creature you control dies, put a Phyresis counter on Weatherlight completed. Then draw a card if it has 7 or more Phyresis counters on it. If it doesn't, scry 1. Okay. So you play this as a weird sort of insurance against board wipes in Colorless that once 4 creatures have died turns into an attacker, and once 7 creatures have died starts drawing cards? Oh, but you always scry 1 even before that point. Huh. Okay. Yeah, this is potentially an interesting card in Red-Black Oni-Cult Anvil decks. Yeah, I could see it as a 1 or a 2 of. My main concern is that the biggest weakness of that deck that I can imagine right now is that it just gets absolutely hosed by the new 3-mana mass portable hole. And this does not feel like it fixes that issue of getting completely hosed by mass portable hole. Still, interesting. An interesting design space. Weird that this is colorless instead of black, though. I don't know how I feel about that. Next up, Karn's Silex. Silex? I'm going to assume this is probably a real word. Maybe not. 3 mana legendary artifact. Karn's Silex enters the battlefield tapped. Players can't pay life to cast spells or to activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. X tap, exile Karn's Silex, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less. Activate only as a sorcery. Players can't pay life to cast spells or to activate abilities doesn't shut off anything relevant in Standard or Pioneer, does it? I mean, it shuts off Phyrexian mana, which mostly isn't relevant. It shuts off fetch lands in older formats, I guess. It shuts off Blitz on exactly Tenacious Underdog? Sure. Shuts off Planeswalkers? Does it? Planeswalkers that require you to pay life? Oh, it shuts off paying the Phyrexian Planeswalkers for less mana, yes. But also, that isn't good. So we don't really need to shut it off. So mostly this is just fancy new colorless board wipe. Okay, so the Golgothian Silex is an entirely original Magic idea that this is, like, referencing. Got it. Yeah, so I mean, I guess if you really want a board wipe that costs a lot of mana in your colorless deck, this exists. So it's not super great against Oni-Cult just because it enters the battlefield tapped, so you can't just use it as a 5-mana board wipe. It has to be a 3-mana card, and then later on a 2-mana card, which gives them the opportunity to blow it up, which isn't necessarily easy, but artifacts are a fair whack easier to remove than enchantments, for red specifically. But potentially interesting. Still, Yasharn this is not, because most of what Yasharn originally shut off was stuff that cared about sacrificing, not necessarily stuff that cared about paying life. This is moderately something. Relic of Legends, 3-mana artifact. Tap to add 1 mana of any color. Tap an untapped legendary creature you control to add 1 mana of any color. The fact that this can hypothetically be turn 2 legendary, turn 3 play Relic of Legends still holding up 2 mana is kind of interesting. definitely kind of interesting, but then you have to play a lot of 2-mana legendaries, and that's less interesting. I don't see a reason to want to play creatures, really. But they almost got me for a second there. Golden Argosy. 4-mana 3/6 legendary artifact vehicle. When Golden Argosy attacks, exile each creature that crewed it this turn. Return them to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control at the beginning of the next in-step. Crew 1. Okay, so like a random vehicle that once again has flicker synergies. I feel like we've done this song and dance before and it hasn't worked out, and I don't really see a super strong indication that that will be the case here, but eh. Why not? Next up, Karn Living Legacy. 4-mana legendary planeswalker Karn. 4 loyalty. +1. Create a tapped Power Stone token. It's an artifact with tap to add Colorless. This mana can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. -1. Pay any amount of mana. Look at that many cards from the top of your library. Then put one of those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of the library in a random order. -7. You get an emblem with tap and untap artifact you control. This emblem deals 1 damage to any target. Golden Argosy is crew 1 as opposed to a higher crew cost, but the main problem is that it doesn't flicker anything until it actually attacks, so like it can't even do it with haste, which just isn't, like, it's not worth 4 mana. It's too long before he gets any kind of value. Not good enough. So Karn Living Legacy is kind of interesting in that I know a lot of people have misread this card because the text on the tapped Power Stone token is wicked unintuitive. This mana can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. Means that it can't be used to cast spells, or rather, if you are casting a spell and that spell is not an artifact, you can't use Power Stone token for it. If you are doing anything other than casting a spell that is not an artifact, you can use the Power Stone token mana, which means you can use it for Karn's downtick because activating abilities or paying for triggered abilities is not casting a spell. Paying for your opponent's make disappear is something that Power Stone token can do, because that's not paying for a spell. You can use it to activate artifacts. You can use it to activate the abilities of other creatures. You can use it to pay ward. You can't use it to pay taxes, weirdly. Because stuff like Thalia is considered to be an additional cost on the card, which that cost is part of casting the spell. So weirdly, you can't use it for that. Or maybe not weirdly, maybe that's just intuitive. But so they're actually a lot less useless than they look. But also they're kind of mostly not hyper useful either. And Karn is a planeswalker that does not really do a very good job of defending itself and downticks for card advantage instead of upticking for card advantage. And the ultimate doesn't win the game, so mostly I don't think this is impressive and probably isn't like good or terribly worth playing, but it's a lot less laughably bad than I've seen a lot of people describing it as. So I felt the need to play devil's advocate for a minute on that. Still kind of bad. Okay, now we hit a bunch of basic lands. And we get Pain lands. That's the next part. Oh, so we have the blue-white Pain land, the black-red Pain land, the red-green Pain land, the white-black Pain land, and the blue-red Pain land. So basically, we get all of the enemy color Pain lands, which is weird. Aren't those the Pain lands that already existed in Pioneer? People are saying it's the worst, which is definitely exaggerated. Oh, no. This Karn's not the worst. Not even close. It's definitely better than old Tybalt. It's probably better than Tamio from Kamigawa. It's 3 enemy, 3. Oh, so I'm missing one. Weird. Okay, so yeah, the black-red one is new, and it's ally color. The white-blue is new, and it's ally color. The red-green is new, and it's ally color. And then Caves of Koilos is old, it's enemy-colored. Shivan Reef is enemy old. And Yavimaya Coast is enemy old. Weird. Okay. Alright. Huh. I mean, they exist. They potentially help fix your mana. I'm probably going to try to not play them in very many decks. But maybe it'll be necessary. We'll see. Figuring out mana bases is a problem for a Chris who has a lot more sleep than this current Chris. Oh, right. Yeah, it's like 1:40, and I just remembered I got like 4.5 hours of sleep last night. Cool. Radical. Delightful. Well, the good news is we might actually finish up this stream before 7 hours, if I manage to finish up in the next 6 minutes. So, Thran Portal. Land Gate. Thran Portal enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands, which means that it's untapped if it's one of your first 3 lands. When it enters the battlefield, choose a basic land type. It is the chosen land type, and anytime you activate it for any mana ability whatsoever, it costs 1 life. So mostly only good if you're really, really desperate for fixing, or if you really, really are desperate for domain. We did this card already, but like for the purposes of the YouTube video, it was like randomly in the middle of green or something. So we're doing it again. Does not excite me for anything other than domain aggro. I don't know that I saw enough domain aggro support for me to believe that domain aggro is actually a viable archetype. Domain, not aggro, but like sort of bordering on, not mid-range either. Feisty mid-range? Is that like an adequate descriptor of an archetype that's like somewhere between aggro and mid-range? It's... Domain might have some kind of feisty mid-range archetype available to it. We're going to go with that. And maybe Thran Portal has a home in that specific shell. It's just highly skeptical that that's like actually something you have a reason to want to do. To make your mana base weird. But, alright. We'll pretend that's like something, and then we'll find out. Which I believe means we're actually done. Yay!